we said economy fluctuates around its potential long-term output, if you remember in the last class or in my last lecture, and these fluctuations can be long-term or short-term or can last much longer than 10 years, for example. Yeah. So in historical, as you can see, if you this is the GDP per capita. So sorry, GDP, real GDP. I'm sorry, not per capita. It's the real GDP indexed to 100 to 1850. Now, as you can see, in the long run, it is increasing overall, but it has a longer spells of contraction, earlier periods, and then the longer spells of growth. So this is more, in a sense, there is a cycle. Yeah, it's a cycle is happening here. However, cycles are not predictable. So this cycle here, this long decline in the graph is basically, I think it was the First World War period. There's another dip here is because of Second World War. So the cycles are sometimes longer, more severe, sometimes are shorter, less severe, and sometimes you don't even see them as recession or expansion. It's just a straight line here sometimes. Yeah. So nevertheless, what we want is with this management of economy or regulation of economy is that we would like to sort of shorten the spell of recessions and lengthen the spells of expansion. Yeah, so we would like to tweak the economy such that it doesn't drop much or the growth doesn't drop much. So here is the 2008 and 9 recession. It was a shorter one than before. This was a longer. There are recessions. So 2001 recession, I think this is 2001. Well, it doesn't really show exactly, but yeah, it's every 10 years here, I think. Yeah, it's every 10 years. So this is 2001 as a result. Yeah, there was also some sort of this. It was, I think, dot-com bubble, the high-tech bubble. Anyway, so then the blue graph here is basically percentage change annually. Yeah, from 1 year to year, this was a positive growth. There was a negative growth in output. So let's move on now. Right, this is again percentage change, annual percentage change in three different indicators of the economic macroeconomic indicators, I should say. Now, notice this, the blue line is GDP, so there's fluctuation. The growth rate is positive in most of the time, but then it dips down below the zero line to negative territory, and it again picks up later. Notice this is volatility in the growth rates. Consumption, as you can see, is moving in tandem with the GDP movement, and that makes sense, right? In fact, the consumption spending makes up large proportion, about 69-70% of spending on GDP. Economic indicators usually move together in tandem. So this is the case. So red line decides what happens to GDP, or the blue line. Similarly, investment does the same. Notice that investment is also following these two other indicators, but investment is a little more volatile. So there's this sort of severe decline when GDP and consumption declines by a little. So investment is more volatile because, once there's a recession, onset of recession, firms cut back on investment. Tesco might want to, let's say BMW might want to open a factory in the UK. And then today they will be thinking, okay, this coronavirus will affect, and we don't know how long the effect is on the economy. So why don't we hold back our decision, to invest? So they might wait 5 years. That means other firms waiting for the next 5 years, and huge amounts will not be invested. As a result, very strong dip in the investment spending. However, if the economy picks up and grows well and then healthy, yeah, coronavirus goes away, then what happens is that the firms become more optimistic. They start investing with an optimism. So that this here is an optimism-driven spending, investment spending. The same here. So it actually, dies out. Optimism dies out eventually, and then again. So these fluctuations, as you can see, one thing we can take away from this graph is that economic indicators move in tandem. So this as a result, there is this knock-on effect in everything. If you reduce consumption, it just affects everything at once. Lower consumption, lower investment goes to affecting the output as a result. How do we analyze? This is the tool now I'll introduce, and I introduced actually for the firm and industry level cases here. So we're looking at now aggregate demand and supply here. The only difference here from what we had before is that we added now the word aggregate to supply and the word aggregate to demand here. So we have aggregate demand, so it's the total demand for goods and services produced in the economy, and the supply is basically total goods and services supplied by companies given different price levels. Now, this is not the price of a product. This is a price level. Since the x-axis is quantity of output, this is usually GDP deflator. Yeah, x-axis contains quantity or shows quantity of output or volume of output. Another name for it is real GDP, real output. Yeah, so this is what it is. Price level is just the GDP deflator here. And you have equilibrium price here where the aggregate supply and aggregate demand curves cross. Yeah, so, and you will also have equilibrium output. So this is short run aggregate supply and demand curve. Now, we would like to keep in the short run the production at this equilibrium price level, and the deviation from equilibrium usually causes all sorts of economic problems that may affect the overall health of economy. Now we can break down the components of aggregate demand. Basically, components of aggregate demand is the same as the components of GDP by expenditure. The aggregate demand is the amount of real domestic output demanded or desired, I should say, by domestic consumers, businesses in the form of investment, governments in the form of government investment, G or government spending, and foreign buyers in the form of expenditure. So this is usually net expenditure, yeah, net experts, I should say, net experts, but just for some reason it's just left as X here. So net, this is net X, collectively desired to purchase at each price level. So basically, it's basically demand is for, in this case, demand is aggregate here. In other words, not for one product or two. It's the general demand for everything. Now you might wonder, how can we sort of sum up the demand for everything here? Well, that's the case. The economists simplify everything. We just add up all the demand for consumer goods, investment goods, government goods, and experts. We add up all the consumption or of all the types of goods that are prevailing in the economy for a given year. Now, I should also say that we hold everything else constant. So that just aggregate demand shows the demand for products at a various level of prices, holding everything else constant. So that's the idea. So this is not a difficult definition. However, what comes next may be a little difficult. Aggregate demand curve is downward sloping. You could say that when the price level goes down, naturally we buy more goods and services. That's perfect. Yeah, that's the correct reasoning. So a decrease in the price level increases the quantity of goods and services demanded, and the opposite also is true. When the price level increases, we demand less, so we have a contraction in aggregate demand. So there is a movement along the demand curve when the price changes. So the same applies here as well. If you remember, demand shifts and also there's a movement along the demand curve. Demand shifters are non-price items, remember, from your microeconomic study earlier in the module. But in this and also when the price changes, there is always movement along the demand curve. So demand curve doesn't change, if you remember, when the price changes. It's the same here in macro aggregate demand curve as well. When the price level, so economy's prices, overall prices change, the only thing we see is a change along or the movement along the curve. Yeah, so it doesn't shift. Yeah, it doesn't shift when the price changes. It turns out when the price changes, three things happen. It could be that our real wealth increases or interest rates fall. Basically, money becomes cheaper to borrow and exchange rates depreciate. So with three things changing, apparently, we will have a movement along the demand curve. Yeah, so that's the idea here with the aggregate demand curve. Yeah, in the other cases, in the microeconomics, we simply said when the price changes, there is a movement along the curve. Yeah, but here the reason for downward sloping shape of the demand curve is because when the price level changes, we have real wealth changes, and then real wealth changing, interest rates changing, and also exchange rates changing as well. Now let's go a little deeper with this. So the first thing is, why does the aggregate demand curve slope downwards? So first of all, there is apparently the wealth effect. The wealth effect operates through the consumption here, through the consumption. So basically a lower price or overall lower price in the economy increases our real wealth. Imagine that you have, £100 in your pocket. Right now, you could buy, that's your wealth, yeah, not income, that's your wealth. You've been holding on to it, you're saving it or whatever it is, yeah. It's just in the form of an asset. Excuse me. Imagine that the prices, overall prices in the economy change it. So everything in price decline. So prices are lower now. What happens now is that now your purchasing power increase. In other words, you are now able to buy more goods for the same savings that you had. Yeah, so you £100 maybe initially bought 10 goods, but because the price declined now, more is available for you now to purchase. You can afford more now. Maybe you can afford now 20 goods. So that affects your wealth basically. So price drops affects your wealth. Yeah, it increases your purchasing power, and as a result, of course, you will be buying more. Yeah, not panic buying, of course. You'll be buying more. You'll be buying different goods now. You can afford varieties of goods. So as a result, consumption spending increases. So there's a movement along the demand curve downwards. So I don't have that curve on the slide, so I'll have to go back. So when the prices drop, you feel like you're wealthier now. You can buy more, so you start buying more. In fact, everyone starts buying more. So that's what happens. This is a herd behavior. Now, next, number two, interest rate effect. This operates through the investment spending, the I in the aggregate demand. So that changes now. Now, how does it do that? So when the prices are lower, what happens is that you have more money. So maybe you don't want to spend all of it. In fact, you do spend all of it, but then some people do not spend all of it. What they do is they put this excess money that, you can buy more for your pound now. So what you do is you put the money in the bank account. And if there's a lot of money in the bank account, what happens is that banks reduce the interest rate because, they need to use the money. They don't simply keep the money in your bank account and pay you interest. They want to also make money out of your money. And that's what they usually do. They don't have their own money. They usually use your money to make money. So basically, interest rates now, in other words, they reduce the price of money, interest rate, yeah. And this becomes attractive for firms, and then what they do, they borrow and spend more on investment goods. So they borrow and start spending more, uh, you know, on capital equipment, computers they may buy. It's cheaper now to borrow, so they could buy new factories, and you may even buy investment goods as well. You could buy a house if you want, yeah. So that's the idea here. So there's an interest rate effect. So what happens is that when price drop as a result through the investment spending, the demand for goods change. So there's an increase for demand. So there's a lower, in other words, higher demand for output with the lower price. Now the last one is the exchange rate effect. Now when the price are lower domestically, excuse me, what happens is that the domestic price lower means foreign good. People from outside will think that it's cheaper to buy from you rather than buying from their own country, from their own producers. So there's demand for your export goods. So more will be produced as a result. Lower prices stimulate export demand. So as a result, we have an increase in output. So lower price increases the demand for export goods, and we produce more to export. So that shifts to the right, not the moves to the right from Y1 to Y2 gradually. So there's a gradual movement along the curve to the point here. Now it's the opposite is true as well for all three cases. Rises in the price reduces our wealth, also increases the interest rates, and also reduces demand for what? Export goods. So high prices in domestically means other people from other countries buy from their own country producers, yeah, so on and so forth. So these three are the reasons why aggregate demand curve is downward sloping basically, yeah. This is an interesting explanation. Hopefully it was clear to you, and make sure that you understand it well, because this is a topic that we're going to be testing in your final exam, and do the final do the weekly quiz, sorry. Now, for a given price level now, we're looking at the shifts now. Yeah. Now remember, we now fix the. By the way, what we didn't cover here is that if I go back here, we looked at aggregate demand from changes from perspective changes in prices and in consumption prices and investment price and export spending, but not G, because government spending. For the government, it doesn't matter how high or low the prices are. They can spend anytime, anything. So it's independently fixed, independently made. Yeah, government purchases are independent of the price level. So that's the idea. This policy is an independent, just like the policy that we are now seeing, to be independent of price levels. The U.S. government is pumping money into the economy, 2 trillion-ish. The UK government is doing the same thing. Germans have done it, and French are doing, and Italians are also doing this. So G is basically is the 2 trillion right now, is expected to be 2 trillion increase expect to increase by 2 trillion, I should say, for the U.S. economy. Yeah, that is the G basically. That's independent of the other components and prices. Now, for a given price level, AD curve shifts because of changes. It's changes in consumption, change in investment, and change in government purchases, and change in net exports. And notice that this could be confusing for some of you, because we mentioned that the consumption changes, increases or decreases the, or makes a movement along the curve. That's true. However, notice that that was because when the price changed, yeah, price changed, we we saw movement along the curve because of consumption or investment or net exports changing. Now, in this case, we fixed the price. Yeah, keep this in mind. This is for a given price level. When this changes, yeah, so price is held constant. When this changes, that's what happens. Either the demand goes up or down. So these changes now are independent of price levels. Earlier, the changes in consumption were induced by price level changes and wealth effects and so on and so forth. Yeah, so keep that in mind now. Yeah, do not confuse it, please. Excuse me. Now, moving on now, one by one, we go over this one by one. Now, change in consumption. Now, events that change how much people want to consume at a given price level. So we keep the prices, constant. The economy doesn't alter its price, or prices are basically somewhere on average staying at a level of £100. Let's say everything on average, yeah. Then things like changes in taxes, could stimulate our consumption. We're holding the price there. Price is not changing. Simply, taxes are changing. Let's say VAT's tax rate decreased. Yeah, it is reduced. Now, goods and services are cheaper now, so we start buying more. Yeah, we start consuming more. So as a result, consumption goods increases. Yeah, VAT changes might affect capital goods as well, and our wealth might increase. We holding the price constant. Remember this, we're holding the price constant. Yeah, we're not changing it. But then stock markets might boom in the economy. As a result, my savings in the stock market may increase or may decrease. So I will, either shift my demand to something else from what I'm consuming, and as a result, that product demand for that product decreases. So there's a shift to the right or left. So in this picture here, you're seeing a shift to the right, but it could also be shift to the left if there is the stock market wealth effect that was a negative. Yeah, and changes in consumer confidence. So if I'm not confident about economy doing well, I may save, because if the economy does badly in the future, I may lose my job, so I need more money in my savings account, so I will start saving and consuming less. So it shrinks my aggregate my demand, and then as a result, if everyone does it, aggregate demand shifts backwards. And increasing, so this is just an example. An increase in consumer spending usually shifts to the right. Decrease in consumer spending usually shifts the aggregate demand curve to the left. That's missing here, but as I mentioned, some of these are just, I don't know, I keep forgetting this. So decrease in consumer spending usually shifts aggregate demand curve to the left. So opposite is true as well. So these things, these changes in these three indicators usually change the consumer spending. Holding, notice this, we're not moving the prices. Now at the given price, we had Y1, which was £100, let's say. Now at the given price, now due to the shift in one of these or all of these together, we have more demand now. Yeah, we demanded more at the given price. Now that's a shift to the right. Next, change in investments leads to shift to the right or left of aggregate demand curve. Now this it could be anything, like events that change how much firms want to invest at a given price level. Yeah, these events could be better technology. Someone develops a new technology, and then other firms will invest in it. Yeah, that means there's a shift to the right and the aggregate demand curve because of this large increase in the demand for this new technology. Or new technology could be anything, could be new computer systems, new faster computers, more efficient computers, or new way of building a new house. Yeah, a lot of it's cheaper to build a house as a result, so there will be greater aggregate demand for goods and services that raw materials. Yeah, so this sends this stimulus, stimulating sort of effect into the economy. Then that shifts the investment. Also increase the investment which shifts the aggregate supply, aggregate demand curve to the right. it could also be change in tax policy. Now, let me go back to technology part. Let's do this thought experiment. Let's say there is a new technology that helps you build the houses at a cheaper cost. Let's say what happens is that construction companies start building new houses. Now, when they do so, they hire more people, they hire more technology, they hire more trucks, more cranes, more all this, diggers and things like this. So these will create employment. You see this as a result is demand for investment is actually increasing the demand for all other parts in the whole economy, basically in different demand for different goods and services. This then increases, puts more money into the pockets of people. So this shift then, as you can see, from old to the new point is actually leads to a big increase in output as well. Yeah, so that's the idea here. So that's just a short, a brief explanation that I wouldn't have been able to explain in the lecture, usually in 1 hour lectures. Now, I will usually delay this until the such explanations until we move on to seminar groups. And anyway, so and that's why I was telling you in the lecture that these seminars and lectures are complements. Yeah, so you should have 10 both of them. Now, change in tax policy could also shift aggregate demand through investment because the government might say there is an investment tax credit. So if you invest, I'll reduce your taxes. That's what's happening right now with the coronavirus situation. To keep the investment spending up, the government is offering tax reductions, so there's a tax credit could stimulate the investment. So they don't tax you as much as they used to tax. So as a result, you have extra money that you can spend on investment goods. Or change in monetary policy, so interest rate reductions, holding the price constant. Government might reduce interest rate. That's what happened. Bank of England reduced interest rate last week, or maybe this was, yes, it was last week. I think it's now 0.10% rather than, it's a very, very low amount of interest rate. Money is so cheap these days, you can borrow a lot. But obviously, it also depends on your credit history. But for firms, this is a signal, positive signal. If the interest rate is so low, banks usually reduce their interest rates requirements. Demand from you. So I should say not demand from you, the price of credit that they offer. So they might, in the past, if you borrowed £1 million as a business owner from, let's say, NatWest for 10%, today with these low interest rates, the interest rate could be as 5%, so half of what you paid before. Yeah. So, and also mortgage, for example. Yeah, mortgage rates will decline due to this change in monetary policy. So there's a shift to the right for investment goods. So demand for houses increase. So there's an example here I've given in this graph that the increase in investment leads to a rightward shift in the aggregate demand curve, and then decrease in investment does the same thing but an opposite way. Yeah, it goes backwards to the left. Next, G, spending in G, or changes in G, government purchases. Now, government purchases, first of all, we need to understand what this is. It could be in the form of, building roads, hospitals, rail networks, and so on and so forth, or purchase of new ventilators, or hiring of new medics, for example, to help with the coronavirus situation and to relieve the pressure from the NHS right now. So these are the government purchases basically. It's like government is like a firm. It basically invests in the economy. Well, obviously government gets the money from taxes, yeah, and also it prints as well. So if government policymakers change government spending at a given price level, so it's holding the price level constant, and then do these changes, make these changes. They might build a new rail network or new hospital. Then that shifts the aggregate demand to the right through the government changes in government spending. So this could be an 2 trillion here, yeah. This for the U.S. government, or a £2,500 to payment to each person in the UK, for example. That is shifting aggregate demand to the right as a result, right? So now, so just to build hospitals, imagine just to build hospitals, how much raw materials you would need. So it means new bricks need to be made, yeah, or brick making companies will start making money. Crane companies start making more money because government will basically hire through companies hire new trucks and cranes from these companies. New workers will be so a lot of basically part of this government spending will go into, let's say, hospitals. Yeah. So this, because of this, just with hospital building, the money just goes through different, members of the economy, and each of these are usually consuming as well. So the consumption spending increases as a result. So government spending, first round spending, is just stimulating the economy further down the line. Yeah. So that's the idea here. Or rail networks, to build rail, you need a lot of steel. So steel companies will benefit from this. So there's this sort of positive shock waves in the economy as a result. Yeah. So aggregate demand shifts to the right. We produce more as a result. Yeah. Right. So I'm gonna leave this here, given the time. And how about the experts? Well, change in experts also, given the price level, happens to shift aggregate demand to the right. Remember in the earlier, I explained with the change in the net experts resulting in a movement along the demand curve, but that was when the price level changed. Now we're holding the price unchanged. We're not changing price anymore, so there's no change in price. But there's still aggregate demand is shifting to the outwards because of change in ethics. But it could be that we are fine in the economy is fine, the price level is flat or kind of constant for a moment. But in Europe, there could be a recession or boom in Europe. Yeah, if there's a recession, maybe they're not buying from us anymore. So that that reduces the aggregate demand or shifts the aggregate demand to the left because export demand declines. Or there could be boom in Europe while holding our prices could be cheaper here. So they might buy more from us, yeah. So there's a shift to the right as a result. Or there could be international speculators speculating badly or positively in the on let's say UK pound against US dollar or euro. So changes in exchange rates affect the demand for our products. So our price do not change, but because the exchange rates are changing, there's a shift to the right or left as well. If pound is appreciating, that makes uh, goods priced in pounds more expensive for others, so they don't buy from us. Then aggregate demand goes down or shifts back to the left. Or if the pound is depreciating, like the case here now, the pound is now about one pound is €1 and 90 cents, 9 euro cents, while 1 pound is $1 and what was this, 18 euro cent euro dollar cents, sorry. So this is a very low sort of exchange rate historically. So what happens is that then Americans can buy from us now if the exchange rates may stay like that, assuming that our domestic price are not changing. So exchange rates now are so low that the British goods are more kind of cheaper. Maybe it's the same price, or more or less the same price as that made in Asian, for example, countries. Yeah, so that stimulates demand or reduces demand as well, depending on which way we're going in the exchange rate.